kind of an absurd number of luxury hotel brands on the market. And so today I wanted to make this quick guide kind of breaking down the differences between luxury hotel brands at each of the 5 major chains. And so for this, we're talking about Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, IHG, and Accor. Although I know for a lot of US viewers, Accor is going to be a less common program. We're not going to go too much in depth in each of these specific brands, but a high-level overview of kind of the differences between them. So I think a good place to start is with Marriott. Marriott obviously has an absurd number of brands. Even at the luxury segment, I think they do have a really strong luxury portfolio and is one of the reasons they are interesting as a program. I would argue that Marriott's top-level brand is either Bulgari or Ritz Reserve. These are actually 2 very different brands, even though they're both at the very top tier. Bulgari does not participate in Bonvoy at all. It is meant to be a super exclusive tier of brand that is only accessible with cash. You get no Bonvoy benefits, no elite qualifying nights, no points, nothing. The only reason it's associated with Marriott at all is because you can book through the Bonvoy app, essentially. And you can book through Marriott Stars as well to receive those benefits. Bulgari is a really unique brand. I have checked out a few Bulgari properties, and I will say they are top tier. It is a very traditional, gaudy, over-the-top luxury. Not that that's really a bad thing. I mean, I will say like there is a minimalism to it, but at the same time, there's this level of over-the-topness. And an example, I think, is the Bulgari in Tokyo, where in this hotel, it is an amazingly beautiful hotel. The rooms are, yes, like minimalist and modern and clean, but they also have this level of plushness to them, where the beds just feel a bit over the top. The pool area has like this gold-plated jacuzzi area, and it's kind of this interesting combination between over-the-top luxury and minimalism, and I find it to be a really nice, exclusive brand where they're going to have very limited room counts. They're operating in pretty major cities around the world. They're not like a Mon that are operating in remote places, but you are always going to find mega top-tier luxury at a Bulgari hotel, and they will cost pricing accordingly. They're very, very expensive. In a similar tier is Ritz Reserve. Ritz Reserve is very different than Ritz-Carlton. It's Marriott's essentially, you could say it's tied with Bulgari for the top-tier brand. It technically participates in Bonvoy. You can use points, you can redeem points, or you can earn points. You do get some status benefits, although they're limited. And these are properties that are really only Ritz in name. They are not really at the same level as other Ritz-Carltons. They are much, much higher. Famous examples, I think one of the most famous in the world is Mendapa, which is the Ritz-Carlton Reserve in Ubud, Bali. I've not stayed there, unfortunately, but I did have lunch there, and I will say it is extraordinarily nice. And everything I've heard about Ritz Reserve properties has been very, very, very good. And I think it is one of those properties that you're going to be in this very top tier upper echelon of luxury where I think so many people, when they think of luxury hotels, they think of a 5-star hotel. And they don't realize that there's actually this whole world of difference within what's called a 5-star luxury hotel. An Intercontinental is very different than a Ritz-Carlton, very different than a St. Regis, very different than a Ritz Reserve or Bulgari. And I would say in like the T1 luxury segment, right, basically the very upper levels of luxury beyond, I think the only exception that you could argue is higher than this is like boutique 10-room private island properties, but that's a whole other beast entirely. I would say like Bulgari and Ritz Reserve both fit into this like ultra T1 luxury. Kind of the remaining of the Marriott properties, the St. Regis is a brand, Ritz-Carlton is a brand, Luxury Collection, that would kind of be in like T2 luxury, where these are very luxurious properties, very opulent. Obviously, there's a big sway between the hotels, but they're going to be larger room counts, larger sizes. They're not going to be operating at the same level of exclusivity and high-touch service as like a Ritz Reserve and Bulgari. And then in T3 luxury, it gets interesting. You kind of have W hotels, JW hotels, and a little bit, you could argue, Edition probably, I forgot to mention, is probably T2 as well. These are approachable luxury hotels, where these are hotels that are very comfortable, very nice, especially in certain markets like Asia, they're great. But it's going to be more approachable, more affordable, more designed for younger people than something like a Ritz or St. Regis, where Ritz, St. Regis, these are like gaudy luxury, a little bit, white glove service over the top. Not that that's a bad thing at all, but that's just the style. Whereas Edition is very interesting because it's a minimalist luxury brand. I would say it's kind of like in between T2, T3, where because of the fact that it's like super minimalist and hyper modern, you're not getting this like over the top luxury. However, it is really interesting in that the room designs are very consistent. I really do enjoy the room designs, but they are a bit stingier on some of the benefits you will get as like a Bonvoy Elite, for example. W&JW, definitely solid, like for sure in tier 3, where approachable, nice luxury hotels designed for younger people. So let's move on to Hyatt here. Hyatt is a smaller luxury portfolio for sure. Park Hyatt is their flagship brand, and I would definitely say fits very comfortably within tier 2 luxury. And to be clear, when I say tier 2 luxury, this is not a bad thing. It's just there are definitely more luxurious properties out there. Park Hyatts are very consistently minimalist in design. They have really good service, great restaurants, very strong elite recognition, which is wonderful to see for a luxury hotel chain. And I've always enjoyed my stay at Park Hyatts. Whenever there's a Park Hyatt in a city I haven't been to yet, I'm always excited to go check it out, just because I know it's going to be at a high level. And what I think is really interesting is seeing how tightly controlled Hyatt has kept the Park Hyatt development in the pipeline, where you'll see Marriott will just treat Ritz-Carlton as this like big resort factory, and we can open these like mega huge properties that really aren't delivering on what people find the Ritz-Carlton name should be, whereas Hyatt is kind of controlling their pipeline. They're opening them slower. Park Hyatt's very concentrated in Asia, but some of the new Park Hyatt openings, such as like the Park Hyatt Jakarta, look absolutely phenomenal. I mean, mind-blowing stuff coming from Park Hyatt as far as what they're building in that regard, and I find Park Hyatts to be a great luxury brand, T2 for sure. And then you have Miraval, Andaz, and Alila, which are definitely, they're less consistent brands for sure. Miraval, I gotta say, is this weird like hybrid of like it's like T2 that kind of wants to be T1 luxury, where it's super expensive, it's all inclusive, it's a wellness resort, but from what I've seen of the properties, I would say is like closer to tier 2. It's mainly for people. There's only 3 properties in the world. There's one in Arizona, Texas, and Vermont. These are properties that are for people wanting to seek like nature escapes and retreats. I've had friends stay at them. They said they've really enjoyed it. I've had one on my list for a while. It's just they're very, very expensive. Andaz and Alila are very interesting because they kind of range from like totally mid and totally unremarkable properties that I don't think would be fair to even call a luxury hotel, to super aspirational world-class hotels. Kind of a swing on this, for example, is like Andaz Mexico City. Totally mid, totally unremarkable hotel. I have no desire to stay there again. Nothing wrong with it, just totally unremarkable. Andaz Costa Rica, world-class hotel. Absolutely love my experience there. I think it's like on par with most luxury hotels around the world. And I would say, in that regard, it fits solidly into T2 luxury. As far as a hotel like Andaz Mexico City, that's not even tier 3 luxury. Let's not even pretend ourselves here. So I think the same thing with Alila, right? You got Alila Villas Uluwatu, you got Alila Ventana, you got Alila Napa Valley. These are full-on T2 luxuries. I would even say for Ventana, you could make a case for it pushing into T1. I wouldn't necessarily agree. These properties are, but you also have on the same front, right? Alila, you got Alila Mangus in Bali, great property. I would not call it a true luxury hotel. You've got some Alilas also in Southeast Asia. You've got Alila Kuala Lumpur, which looks like a very nice hotel, probably not a true luxury hotel as well. And so I think it's really interesting to see kind of a bigger swing there. Lila is the brand. Alila is a nature-focused luxury brand. I really like the theming of nature, bringing it into the luxury segment. And so it's supposed to be close, not like a wellness resort, but just more nature-themed in the luxury. Sometimes that means you have more rustic rooms, sometimes it doesn't. But I really do love Alila properties. I've had great stays at them. I think, Alila Ventana is always like a personal favorite. People in the US love that property. I think it's really great. I don't think it's worth the rates they're charging in terms of cash, but I absolutely think it's like a wonderful luxury hotel. Andaz is more like, targeted at younger people, included minibar. It's kind of like a toned down version of W, I would say. A little more refined, if you will. I think places like Andaz Costa Rica are true luxury hotels. Andaz Maui is, especially as far as the Maui market goes, wonderful property. But I do think Hyatt has focused less on the consistency of luxury for the Alila and Andaz brands. So I think if you're going to stay at one of those, have a better understanding of like what that particular property is, because I think you can rely less on the brand definition there. Okay, so let's move on to Hilton. Hilton's a very interesting one because they have a lot of hotels, but a very poor collection of luxury hotels as far as the breadth goes. However, I do really like the quality of hotels Hilton has in the luxury segment. I'm actually staying at a Waldorf Astoria right now. Guess in the comments down below which one. Should be fairly easy to guess based on this room type if you've been here before. I like Hilton in terms of, I think what Hilton does, as some of their luxury hotels, they push to a higher tier at the very top end. They have a bigger swing in the level of luxury at the top end. Here's what I mean by this. Hilton's flagship brand is Waldorf Astoria. Waldorf Astoria is very interesting because they have properties such as Waldorf Astoria Maldives, which I would say, for the most part, I think I would have to argue is like is a T1 luxury hotel, which Hyatt doesn't really have. Because the base room at Waldorf Astoria Maldives is 3,000 square foot. You got a giant pool. You're essentially half over water. It is ridiculous how nice that property is. But you've also got hotels like Waldorf Maui. Not really a Waldorf, okay? It's not close. They don't do turn-down service. It's like a zoo. I've had great stays there. Don't get me wrong. It's not a real Waldorf. And so with Hyatt, like Park Hyatt, that's not really normal at a Park Hyatt, like to have that big of a swing. Park Hyatt's more consistent, but I will say Waldorf pushes higher than Park Hyatt, for example. Waldorf is probably one of the highest pushing standard luxury brands for a chain. And I think, look, when there are cities that have Waldorf Astorias, I want to look them up because they are really, really interesting hotels a lot of the times. And some of my favorite Waldorf Astoria stays, Waldorf Astoria Dubai DIFC, Waldorf Astoria Beverly Hills, and of course, Waldorf Astoria Cabo. These are properties that really do push the envelope of kind of what a chain luxury hotel can be. And I always enjoy my experiences at them. I would say, it's kind of a more traditional luxury sense, but not like as over the top sometimes as like Ritz or St. Regis tries to be. It's a little more refined, I find. And I really like it. It's almost kind of like the way to describe the spectrum of like gaudy and over the top to like hyper minimalist. Let's say Edition and Park Hyatt over here, Ritz, St. Regis, Bulgari, those type of hotels are over here. I would say, Waldorf kind of sits in the middle, but achieves a really high level of luxury. Conrad Hotels is kind of Hilton's second tier of luxury hotels. These are bigger hotels. They try to be really new, more modern for young people. I've only stayed at one Conrad. Personally, didn't have that great of an experience, but I haven't tried enough of the brand yet to fully say. I would say Conrad, though, one of the big things they kind of focus on is having new hotels. And so I would definitely say Conrad is like a T3 luxury brand. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it's closer to like a W, a JW, maybe like certain Andazes, right? Things like that, where it's luxurious, but I wouldn't call it a true luxury experience if that tracks. Hilton also has an interesting kind of similar to Marriott's luxury collection. They have they call LXR Hotels and Resorts. Similar to the luxury collection with Marriott, and I kind of forgot to mention this, but the luxury collection with Marriott does have a pretty big swing in terms of the level of luxury because it is not necessarily we have X brand standards we need to follow, right? These are more unique luxury properties that maybe wouldn't traditionally fit into a normal brand standard. Similar with LXR Hotels and Resorts. I believe I've actually only stayed in one, which is Crockford's in Vegas. I enjoyed my stays when I had them. I've heard it's gone downhill a bit, but I do think Hilton is pretty strong on the LXR. Oh no, I've stayed in another one. What am I talking about? Roku Kyoto. Roku Kyoto, Hilton LXR. Lovely property. Amazing. One of my favorite hotels in Japan. Probably actually my single favorite hotel in Japan that I've personally stayed at. I think they're an amazing hotel, amazing nature, amazing rooms, really friendly service. And so I think there's a big swing there, right? It's going to be similar to luxury collection in that regard. But I think certain LXR properties are really nice. I would definitely say solid T2 luxury most of the time. Really, really, really nice hotels. I would highly recommend those. And then Hilton, of course, has the partnership with Small Luxury Hotels of the World. This would be weird to classify as a specific category. I would say these swing from T3 to T1 for sure. Because T1 luxury, right, you have some of these ridiculous properties on SLH, like the Irio in, I think that's how you pronounce it, in Austria, which is a really small, I think all-inclusive hotel that's $2,000 a night, and it's super modern, super exclusive. It's staying, in this lodge almost, where it's the highest levels of service. But then there's also some pretty average, unremarkable SLHs That's a pretty large swing there. So I think between T1 to T3, it really depends on the property in that regard. So next, second to last, I want to talk about IHG. IHG is making a pretty strong push into the T2 luxury segment, where IHG has three real luxury brands. There's at the top Six Senses, then Regent, and then Intercontinental. And pretty much I would describe these in terms of the level of luxury, mostly being T1, T2, T3 respectively. So Six Senses is their flagship brand, where it is a wellness, like nature-focused resort. Use a lot of wood and natural materials in the design. You're going to usually have, on some of the older properties, more rustic rooms. I don't find that a problem, though. I've unfortunately only had one Six Senses stay, and that's Six Senses Lamu in the Maldives, and phenomenal stay. Hard product. I could definitely see why some people don't love the hard product. It's not for them. It's like older. It's like a wood design. I loved it because it's totally the experience of being somewhere unique. It's not a traditional big box hotel. They really go all in on the theming there. It's like rustic rooms, but I love it because it didn't feel rustic as an old. It felt rustic by design. It felt like it was meant to be that way. And I felt just so comfortable at the same time, if that makes sense. Like I felt like I had all the comforts of staying in a super modern room, but I had all the nice theming of a not as modern room. And the service standards at Six Senses, at least the one I was stayed at, my God, I still have not been able to replicate anything close to the service standard of that hotel of any other hotel I've been at in the world. And so I would say Six Senses, mostly are in this like T1 luxury segment. I think there are certain properties that they have that are closer to T2. I've heard certain locations, maybe not as high, not a true Six Senses. I've heard Six Senses Bali, wonderful hotel, not quite the level of other Six Senses. And so there's there's a little bit of a swing there, but T1, T2. Regent, solid T2 luxury brand. I think they're pushing really hard into new properties in Asia. And from my experience, they've been amazing. I would say Regent is trying to be a more generous luxury brand than a lot of other ones. And not by elite status. Honestly, IHG sucks with elite status across the board. But Regent Hotels is, one of their new brand standards that they're pushing. And I had a conversation with the general manager of the Regent Hotel in Phu Quoc, which is one of my favorite hotels in the world. And he was talking about how Regent as a brand, the push they're trying to make is that they should not be nickel and diming their guests. The guest wants to have a Coke, let them have a Coke, right? Include the minibar. Give some free laundry. Give free breakfast. And I wholeheartedly believe that. A luxury hotel is not about nickel and diming your guest over small, stupid details that don't really cost the hotel money. I'd rather you charge a higher rate and make the experience better. And that's kind of the core premise of a luxury hotel. So I love what Regent's doing. They're very modern hotels. They have this very unique, I don't even know how to describe it, like this unique design language to them a lot of the times, at least the newer ones do. And I think they've been doing a great job. Regent Phu Quoc is great. Regent Hong Kong is great, although they need some work on the elite recognition for sure. Regent Canggu I've heard some issues with, but hopefully I think they're going to adjust on them. It was like way too expensive when they opened, but I think they've like reduced the pricing. So I like Regent a lot. And then like the T3 luxury brand of IHG, Intercontinental, and maybe throw in Kimpton there. Intercontinental is like a pretty traditional big box luxury hotel chain. Nothing like too unique about it. Pretty similar to Grand Hyatt. Maybe like some nice Grand Hyatts would compare pretty similarly to some Intercontinentals. That's not to say there aren't T2 Intercontinentals. Like Intercontinental in Da Nang, Vietnam. That one looks insane, and I would love to stay there, and that definitely looks like a true luxury hotel for sure. Kimpton, I think the Kimpton Grand Cayman Seafire is probably the most luxurious Kimpton in the world. I could be wrong, let me know in the comments. But that hotel looks really nice. Kimpton is definitely more of like a young, hip, very similar to Andaz type vibe is the best way I could describe it. I want to talk finally about Accor. Accor is very interesting because they're not as common for like US travel optimizers, but I do want to talk about at least two of their brands, which is Raffles and Fairmont. And I think these very squarely fit in the T2, maybe T1 for Raffles, and then like T2 to T3 for Fairmont, where Raffles is their flagship iconic brand. And I will say some Raffles properties do push above what seems to be standard for like chain luxury hotels. Examples of this would be like the Raffles Doha, the Raffles Singapore, right? These are properties where if you've seen videos of them and I told you this was a Waldorf Astoria, you'd go, wow, that is like a weirdly nice Waldorf Astoria. That's like beyond what I would expect. And so I think Raffles is like this really interesting brand that I've never stayed at a Raffles, but from what I've seen about them, they operate at a very high level of luxury. Obviously, they have a swing in them, right? Like there's some that aren't as good, but some of the top tier ones really do impress me. And then Fairmont is kind of this, I would say similar to Intercontinental, maybe a little nicer depending on the property, right? It's like the tier just below Fairmont. And so you're going to kind of have bigger box luxury in all that regards. And so, yeah, I think this is kind of a summary of how these luxury brands work. My personal favorite luxury brands is like hotels go. I love Park Hyatts. I love Waldorf Astorias in certain circumstances. I like Six Senses. I like Regent. I pretty much like all the luxury brands. I mean, I don't know if there's any I would like point to that I don't like. Those are just some ones I particularly like. I would say you should not necessarily pick a hotel purely based on the brand, but the brand acts as a very good kind of filter where you can use it to approximate some very broad level of what the hotel is going to be like. If there's a market and I see that there is a Park Hyatt, a St. Regis, and a JW, I'm going to have a good idea of how to rank these hotels, where you're probably going to have Park Hyatt or St. Regis on the top. We'll have to look at some reviews to figure that out, which one will be better, and JW a tier below. Again, nothing wrong with that, but in just terms of the level of luxury, it gives you an idea of what to expect. So I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.